Welcome to Wander Stories, a podcast bringing you stories from destinations around the world or across the street. This is your host, Susan Lanier Graham, publisher of the award-winning online travel magazine, WanderWithWonder.com. In Wander Stories, we go behind the scenes to share some of the wow moments we discover as we travel. My husband Bill and I sometimes find the best stories as we travel across the U.S. in our fifth-wheel trailer. Other times, we might discover stories as we jet off to other locales. But no matter the source or where we go, we love bringing you Wander Stories to help inspire your own travels. So pull up a chair, grab a glass of bubbles or your favorite beverage, and enjoy this episode of Wander Stories. Welcome to a new episode of Wander Stories. So today I'm coming to you from Menifee, California. Menifee is about 16 miles north of Temecula and a part of California's Inland Empire. Menifee is also about 30 miles southeast of Riverside. It's part of Riverside County and has a population of about 92,000 residents. Interestingly, it has only been a city since October 2008. Going way back, the area's earliest inhabitants were the Luceno and Pachanga people. I know I'm slaughtering the pronunciation. But then it became part of the Spanish Empire in the 1700s and was eventually ceded to the U.S. by Mexico in 1848. At the time, Menifee was a farming community and then became a major mining community in the 1880s with the discovery of quartz by miner Luther Menifee Wilson, the town's namesake. In the early 1960s, Del Webb founded Sun City here. At the same time, he began Sun City in Arizona. Now, Sun City, California began, as its Arizona counterpart did, as a planned active retirement community. Soon, other master plan communities popped up. Then, in 2008, the entire area was incorporated as the city of Menifee. And today it includes the communities of Sun City, Quail Valley, Menifee Lakes, and portions of Romoland. Now, on to the episode, where today we discuss how hotels can really make a difference in your travels. I've always loved hotels. As a little girl, my parents would take my sister Catherine and me on frequent trips. Sometimes it was just a quick weekend getaway. Other times it was a trip for my dad's cattle business. He raised Canina cattle in Virginia. It's an exotic breed of cattle from Italy. So we frequently traveled for cattle shows and auctions. Or sometimes it was a road trip. We took a lot of road trips when I was little. But the hotel, or motel, as it was in the late 60s and early 70s, was the highlight of every trip. My sister and I would rush into the hotel room, opening every drawer and door, looking under the beds, trying out the chairs, bouncing on the beds. Even cheap hotels, and we used to stay at a lot of Holiday Inns and then later at Days Inns, which I think at the time they were called $8 up Days Inn. And then it went to 8 Days In and now Days Inns. But they used to have glasses, real glasses, and ice buckets arranged on a tray. Oh, the hours of entertainment from those glasses and that tray. We played restaurant nonstop in that hotel room. And I've never gotten over that fascination with hotel rooms. I adore those little soaps, and I'm fascinated by the amenities you find in hotel rooms. As journalist Bill Bryson says, it amazes me that I still get excited in hotel rooms just to see what kind of shampoo they've left me. I totally get that. I'm the same way. My husband says I'm a little bit of a hotel snob. And yes, I'm guilty as charged. I adore nice hotels. Now, I know some people feel like it's a waste of money to splurge on a nice hotel because you only sleep in the room. I've heard that so many times. But for me, that hotel room is a sanctuary while I'm away from home. Some of my most memorable travel moments revolve around the exceptional hospitality I've received at hotels, from the super luxurious to the more budget-friendly stays. The wow moments usually are because of someone reaching out during a time of need. So here are several of my most memorable hotel experiences. One of my most unforgettable trips was the time I flew alone to France. I was excited but a bit anxious to be so far from home and alone. I was staying at the gorgeous Château de la Massardier in Saint-Tropez. Seriously, a dream destination in this beautiful luxury chateau. When I arrived, the hotel manager, a lovely British gentleman named Gerald Hardy, met me and showed me around. I was impressed by Mr. Hardy. He would call other guests by name as we passed them. He also spoke to every employee with the same level of grace and respect, whether it was the young man polishing the banisters, the chef with his 2 Michelin stars, or the doorman who opened the door for us. Mr. Hardy and I spent a wonderful evening over dinner, telling each other our stories. Even though I was an experienced traveler, I did reveal to him during dinner that it was my first solo trip to Europe, and I felt a little bit anxious. He reassured me that Château de la Massardier was the perfect start to my journey, but told me to call him if I needed anything. He gave me his card and let me know that he would be the manager on duty for the evening, so I should feel free to call. Jet lag can be brutal, especially when traveling across multiple time zones. Combining that with my first solo international trip jitters, I had a hard time sleeping that night. At about 4 a.m., I decided I wanted something warm to drink. Hot tea. So I got up and looked and realized there was nothing in the room. So I called the front desk. To my surprise, Mr. Hardy himself answered. I asked him if there was a place I could get a cup of tea. At this point, I was hoping for a hot water dispenser and an instant tea bag. But he reassured me the hotel would bring me a pot of tea immediately. After asking if I was okay with Earl Grey and if I preferred milk, he told me it would be just a few moments. About 10 minutes later, I heard a knock on my door. I opened it, and there was Mr. Hardy himself holding a tray with a pot of Earl Grey tea and steamed milk. He sat the tray down, and the aroma of hot tea and warm pastries filled me with the most amazing sense of gratitude. He pointed to a plate of beautiful croissants. I hope you don't mind, but the pastry chef took hot croissants from the oven for breakfast, so I added 2 for you. Did I mind? I almost cried. Mr. Hardy poured me a lovely cup of tea, suggested that I try to doze a bit, and reminded me that I had until about 10:30 to come down for breakfast, and he left me alone. As I sipped my warm tea, I curled up on the sofa and nibbled on the most amazing pain au chocolat and flaky, buttery croissant of my life. I slept beautifully for a few hours and emerged refreshed in time for breakfast. Although Mr. Hardy had left after his night on duty, he had notified the assistant manager about my night, and he checked in with me to ensure everything was okay. I kept in touch with Mr. Hardy until his passing a few years ago. I would get a lovely Christmas card every year, and I wrote about Château de la Massardier countless times in various publications. I'll be sure to put the link to the chateau in today's show notes. Now I also have 2 Texas hotels that have saved the day for me, both during snowstorms. Yes, snowstorms in Texas. If anyone tells you it doesn't get cold in Texas, they're lying. I know firsthand. So the first was 10 years ago, in December 2013. I had flown into Texas for a press trip to Grapevine, Texas. Grapevine, the Christmas capital of Texas, wanted us to experience all the fun Christmas activities, so we flew in that first week of December. That same afternoon, I had unfortunately discovered that a good friend had suddenly passed away after a battle with cancer. So I was feeling very sad being away from my husband, Bill. So I called Bill, and I was upset, but I told him I'll be okay. We have this busy schedule over the next few days. It will preoccupy me. He and I talked about the possibility of snow that was forecast for the Dallas area starting later that night, but I laughed. It doesn't snow in Dallas. So I gathered myself and I joined my group for dinner. We had a great first night at dinner, with the weather forecast as the forefront of conversation. Now, mind you, Dallas, Texas is not accustomed to snow. So the locals told us that any accumulation would shut down the city. So we were all hoping it wouldn't really snow. As I enjoyed the meal with my fellow travelers and the folks from the Grapevine Convention and Visitors Bureau, I didn't realize that one, it was snowing heavier, and two, my husband, who worked for American Airlines at the time, had hopped on a plane in Phoenix, bound for Dallas, just to be with me because of my friend's death. We finished dinner and returned to our hotel, the Hilton DFW Lakes Executive Conference Center. By then, the snow was falling heavier, and we all agreed we would meet the next morning for breakfast, and our host, Lee Lyons, would let us know if there needed to be any change to the schedule because of the weather. My husband arrived, much to my surprise, at about midnight. It had taken him forever to get there. He got a seat on the very last plane arriving in DFW for what would turn out to be several days, although we didn't know it that night. And he finally found an Uber to bring him the few miles to the hotel. He said the ride had been long and grueling and warned that the roads were getting treacherous. We woke up the next morning to a winter wonderland. Grapevine was living up to its name as the Christmas capital of Texas. The only catch was we couldn't leave the hotel to experience it. Everything was shut down. No vehicles were coming or going. Streets were impassable with layers of ice and snow. The hotel's employees were stuck in the hotel. We all dubbed the experience Snowmageddon, and still to this day, 10 years later, all laugh about that week that we stayed at the hotel. It could have been a disaster. Instead, I've never had a better trip. Not only was Lee, on behalf of the Grapevine CVB, the most amazing host, everyone at the hotel made us feel welcome. We were all in it together. We spent our days in the hotel bar, Bonnie and Clyde's hideout, playing games, telling stories, and yes, drinking. The staff ate in the restaurant, and they would sleep anywhere. They were in available rooms. They were in the ballrooms because no one could leave. We all became neighbors over those few days. I will never forget the hospitality we felt during our stay. Several years later, in 2017, Bill and I moved to Dallas with American Airlines. We lived a few miles from Grapevine, and I would frequently stroll the streets, always feeling a special bond with the city because of that winter. And yes, I finally got to enjoy the amazing experience of Grapevine at Christmas. And I'll put a link in today's show notes for all the fabulous things you can experience when you check out Grapevine at Christmas. But, surprisingly, that wasn't my only snow encounter in the Dallas area, which led to a memorable hotel moment. As I mentioned, we moved to Dallas in 2017 and rented a home on Lake Caroline in the Las Colinas region of Irving, right outside of Dallas, about 15 minutes from DFW Airport. During COVID, my husband retired from the airline, and in late 2020, we decided it was time to go home to Arizona. We made arrangements to move at the beginning of March 2021. We had everything all planned out, and then the snowstorm of 2021 hit. If any of you remember from the news, a major ice and snowstorm swept through Texas in February. And yes, we were still there. The storm dumped about a foot of snow on us in Irving and, once again, left roads impassable. I laugh when people tell me that it never happens in Texas. Yes, it does. I've been stuck in the snow in Texas twice in a decade. Most people in Dallas lost power, and many places lost water when water lines froze. Our apartment complex was only without power for a few hours, but the water lines froze not only in the apartments, but between the complex and the city. Some apartments flooded. We were lucky that nothing flooded, but we were without water and couldn't even get water. After 3 days of breaking ice at the pool just to get water to flush the toilets, we were told it would be at least 2 more weeks before we had any water. We were all packed up and ready to move at this point. We called the moving company, and they could accelerate our move by about 10 days. But that still meant we had a week, and I was not willing to sit for another week without water. The streets were still a mess, ice-covered and treacherous, and any hotels in the area that had power were sold out. I was so frustrated. I had met the manager of Marriott Dallas Las Colinas a few months earlier and had her phone number, so I called her and asked if there was even one room available. I explained our situation, and she told me, yes, they had one room. I booked it immediately. We packed a few clothes, our laptops, and headed a mile up the road to the hotel. Mind you, this was in the middle of COVID. In February 2021, there were no vaccines yet, and there had been a sharp spike in infections because of the winter. We hadn't been inside a restaurant in almost a year. We were nervous, but we really had no alternative given the situation. The hotel staff was amazing. Those of us staying were all there because our homes were flooded, we were without electricity, we were without water, we were stranded and couldn't get a plane. So there was a reason all of us were there. The restaurant was still closed because of COVID, but the bar was open and serving a limited menu. During the week we spent at Marriott Dallas Las Colinas, we all felt like family. The bartender knew each of us by name. The guests became familiar faces. We all spent our days either in our rooms or at tables scattered around the lobby. It was the first time many of us had been with other people in months. The staff accommodated us for anything we needed. I'll put a link to the hotel in the show notes, and I recommend if you fly in and out of DFW and have an overnight, stay at the Marriott Las Colinas. It's a really great area, easy access to some great restaurants at the Toyota Music Factory. There's a big theater there. There's always some event going on. And check out the restaurants on North O'Connor Boulevard just around the corner. And as a side note, I recommend have dinner at Hugo's Invitados. You must order the cracklin pollo. It's one of the most flavorful dishes ever. And I'll add a link to Hugo's in the notes as well. So final example was when we visited Mandapa, a Ritz-Carlton Reserve in Ubud, Bali. Under any circumstances, this is a magnificent property. Hugging the banks of the Ayung River, surrounded by lush forests, but close to the center of Ubud. The intimate retreat has 35 luxurious suites and 25 private pool villas, each with its own butler. When we arrived, however, it was under extraordinary circumstances. The day before our big trip to Bali, my husband had a nasty fall about 7 feet from the top of a ladder onto our gravel yard. Fortunately, he didn't break anything, but he couldn't put weight on one leg. We decided to take the trip anyway. He told me he could convalesce in Bali as well as in Arizona, and we arranged for a wheelchair to transport him on and off the planes and through the terminals. We arrived in Bali and we spent a few days at a resort overlooking Jimbaran Bay before heading to Ubud. By then, Bill was getting better and he was walking with crutches. We arrived at Mandapa and our butler, a lovely young woman who had received her training in Switzerland, met us and immediately wanted to pamper us. She was particularly concerned about Bill hobbling around on his crutches. After the first day there, Bill graduated to a cane and walked more, trying to exercise his leg whenever he had a chance. We were staying in a magnificent riverfront private pool villa. When I say exquisite, that's an understatement. It had a beautiful Balinese garden with an outdoor shower, magnificent indoor shower and soaking tub, a beautiful bedroom with a sitting area, and a separate house with a living dining area. It was all separated by a private pool with beautiful views down into the river bottom. But as spectacular as that room was, the kindness of our butler and the other staff made this an exceptional experience. One day, Bill decided to walk up the hill from our villa to the main lodge to exercise his leg. As he left our villa, the gardener working just outside offered to take him up the hill in the golf cart. Bill refused and explained he wanted to walk. Along the way, he had 2 or 3 others offer to give him a ride as he made his way up the mountain. When he arrived at the main lodge, our butler greeted him with a cool cloth and a drink and insisted on bringing him back down the hill in the golf cart and helping him into the villa. Our entire stay was like that. The staff greeted us by name each day when we arrived at the restaurant. Our first day, I asked about mangosteens, my favorite fruit in the world that I had discovered on a visit to Thailand. They told me it was early in the season, but they would see what they could do to find mangosteens. The next morning, the staff greeted me at our table with a plate of fresh mangosteens. They even prepared a cocktail later in the day featuring mangosteens. The morning before our departure, they arrived at our door with a package filled with fresh mangosteens for me to take with me. They also offered us gifts, this exquisite little dish crafted of shells, and a pair of salt and pepper shakers that I had admired on the table in the restaurant. Those items remain with me, reminders of the kindness of strangers who made us feel special in a hotel room far from home. In the words of Maya Angelou, people will forget what you said, forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Now, I would love to hear some of your moments when you felt special during your travels, or how a stranger has helped you when you needed it most, or maybe a hotel that you think about and it feels like that sanctuary. Drop us a note or leave a comment. We'd love to hear your wander stories as well. I will talk to you next time with more wander stories. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Wander Stories. Join us next time when we share more stories from around the world or across the street. Until then, check out wanderwithwonder.com for more of my favorite travel destinations. Be sure to check today's show notes for links to give you more information on what we talked about. We love sharing our stories with you. So subscribe to Wander Stories and never miss another episode. We'd love to hear some of your wander stories as well. So be sure to share your feedback and drop some notes in the comments. Oh, and remember, share wander stories with a friend. Until next time, when we bring you more wander stories, I hope you discover some of your own wow moments wherever your travels may take you.